I pushed it over
I
to
can go
you.
get it.
I pushed it over to you on the table.
Oh.
It's on the-
Fred.
Not yet. Good evening, everyone. Before we take the pledge, if you're at home listening, we have audio but no visual. But the meeting will be copied on DVD and we'll replay at its regular time. So greetings and welcome to the Board of Selectmen Highway Cemetery Commissioners meeting of Monday, January 27, 2020, 6:32. First order of business, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have a quorum present. Mr. Massey is running late, and Mr. Joseph would like to be dialed in. Has to be done through a roll call vote. So Chair will entertain a motion to approve remote participation.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Siganovich,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Johnson. Roll call vote.
Gary Siganovich, aye.
Stephen Sullivan, aye.
Jay Johnson, aye.
Unanimous.
I
So at
will
this
call
point,
him.
I'm going to take a brief 30-second while we call Paul in.
Hello, Paul, it's Gary. Meeting starting. I'm calling to dial you in. Sure thing. You're on speaker now and under a microphone. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, Paul.
Hey, how are you?
Very good, thank you. You?
Yeah, I can't see the meeting televised yet, but that's okay.
Well, the good thing is the visual's off anyway, so you're not missing anything. All we have is audio tonight right now.
Okay, good enough for me.
Okay. So first up on the agenda, second, is acceptance of minutes of January 13th, 2020. What is the board's pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that we accept the minutes of January 13th, 2020.
Second.
I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded. Any further corrections? Hearing none, all in favor state aye.
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 Unanimous. 3, appointment resignation, Dudley Police, conditional appointment as reserve officers. Officer Amar Diab? Amar?
Yes.
Sorry. And Officer Jesse Caney? Chief Wayner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is another part of our reserve process, as you can recall. We bring individuals up before you for conditional appointments, so which means the board takes action to offer them a conditional appointment at this time. They'll still be required to finish their background check, the psychological evaluation, medical screenings, and everything else. As long as all the other parts will be passed successfully, I'll then bring them back up in a month or so, whatever the time frame is, in order to be given a formal appointment to the reserve force. So I met with the evaluation committee. Both of these gentlemen have been interviewed by the committee, and at this point, the committee has recommended to me that they be put up for consideration. So at this time, I have put forward the names of Amar Diab and Jesse Caney for conditional appointments to the police reserve force. And they're here to talk about themselves or and introduce themselves or ask you any questions if you wish.
I'll open it up to the applicants at first. Which one of you gentlemen like to go first?
Go ahead. Good evening. My name is Amar Diab. I live in Auburn. I'm 30 years old. I work as an EMT and a special medic for amphibious medic. I'm also an auxiliary police officer with Billerica. I've been on the force for almost a year, since April. I used to thinking about becoming a police officer. I mean, I'm still, obviously, because really I want to give back to the community and keep the peace. I want to develop my my interaction with the community as well. I have a mom and a dad, 2 brothers, and I'm so excited to finish the process and moving forward. I'll be honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
So what attracted you to Dudley?
It has a good record. I heard good things about it, and I took the test. Took it until I pass it.
So will you remain a liquor reserve also? If you're appointed here, will you remain?
No, I'll be just with Dudley.
Okay.
Mara's also from, originally from Iraq, and came here via, was it Syria after that?
Yep, so I am original from Iraq, and after the war, my father got shot. I was 15 years old, traveled to Syria. It was a big tragedy for me. I'm the oldest son, so I had to start from below zero, no skills for working, and just created a different person than who I am. I have big responsibility. I'm still taking care of my mom and dad, PTSD, severe depression, etc. After Syria, after we traveled to Syria, the war started in Syria, I get back to Iraq, and when we applied to the United States, we had to wait 9 to 10 years approximately. Came by myself, 8 months, stayed here until my family arrived. It was really challenging waiting on the phone to somebody to call me, hey, your family's dead. Sorry to bring it up, but just have to tell you a little bit about it. And finally got here, the world just changed for me. And I decided to move along and create my future. United States is my dream, to be honest with you. The land of opportunities. You can be whoever you want if you work hard. And I always believe in hard work pays off. And don't give up. Giving up is not in my category.
Excellent.
Mr. Chairman, let's have Mr. Caney follow that speech. All right, let's see what you got.
Okay.
So, my name is Jesse. I'm originally from Dudley, but I currently live in Air. I'm a full-time firefighter for the town of Concord. Prior to that, I used to fight wildfires out in California. I came here before and talked about my experiences with that. I'm still a part-time call member of the Dudley Fire Department, and that's where I got my start in emergency services. Ever since I was a kid, I wanted to work in law enforcement. I enjoy the job description. It's very variable. You get to do new things every day, which is what I find exciting. I also get to help out individuals, which is kind of the whole reason why I got into emergency services. So when the test came up for Dudley, I thought, why not try to get on to the town that I grew up in and have so much invested in right now. So I'm glad to be appointed as an officer and hope to actually serve the community one day.
Excellent. I knew you looked familiar. Mr. Johnson.
Well, thank you both for wanting to do the work. So obviously it's not easy work, and it's busy work too from last few days especially, right, Chief?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I don't have any other questions for you. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Mr. Siganovich.
Just want to echo Mr. Johnson, thank you for applying. You both have gone through the academy?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Ready to hit the ground running.
Yes.
That's all I have.
Paul.
I'm okay.
Excellent.
Okay, but do you have anything?
Alex, you want to add?
Pretty two cool, remarkable stories. You guys fighting in California, the wildfires, and you coming from Iraq and starting pretty much from nothing and working your way up. It's a really two remarkable stories. So thank you for applying and coming out and supporting our town.
That's one reason why I love this seat.
So, Mr. Ruda, so the motion would just be to grant a conditional appointment with no,
Is that what we're looking for? Chief?
Yes, no date.
No
Yes,
dates.
because once they complete all the necessary requirements, I'll bring their names back forward for a formal appointment to the board.
Chair will entertain a motion for conditional appointment of the candidates.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to appoint Amar Daheb.
Yes, sir.
I said that correctly?
Correct, sir.
Excellent. And Officer Jesse Caney as conditional appointments as reserve officers in the town of Dudley.
Second?
Motion made and seconded. Any further questions for the chief or the applicants? Hearing none, all in favor, state aye.
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 Unanimous. Good luck, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it.
You know, we had a roll call vote.
One sec. Sorry about that. We have to roll call vote because Paul's remote. So roll call vote. Mr. Johnson.
Jay Johnson, aye.
Mr. Joseph.
Aye.
Mr. Siganovich.
Gary Siganovich, aye.
And Mr. Sullivan, aye. Unanimous again. 8-0. Next up, public comments, citizen comments. Anybody wishing to be heard, not on the agenda, not requiring a vote of the board? Why, yes, Ms. Gardecki, how are you? Paul, Joan Gardecki's coming up to the table.
Yep, thank you.
Yep.
I came tonight to thank the board and the administrator and to commend Vinnie and the highway crew and building and grounds for the work that they did on the rail trail on Mill Road. They did a fantastic job. It was really devastated.
Right.
And I recently started walking again with my dog, and it went from a 2-foot path to now a 10 or 12-foot path. And all the tree trunks are gone, and all the branches that were across it are gone. And I'm very thankful.
Yeah, we certainly appreciate it, Joan, because somebody had come in a couple months back with some complaints about the parking lot. I know I had gone down like the next week or so, and it was already, everything was cleared up nice. They did a really nice job. I agree. We appreciate you coming in.
It was, I'm sure Ken is smiling down at it.
Yeah, that's going to be the Ken Butkevich Trail someday. Thanks, Joan. Anybody else wishing to be heard not on the agenda? Seeing none. Town Administrator report, Mr. Ruda.
Board members, good evening. We're now eligible for another round of Green Community grant funding. As you recall, the board voted to include Dudley Schools in our energy reduction plan, and in doing so, we've also opened the door for Dudley Schools to seek grant funding under our ERP as well. Last week, I had a meeting with Ian McKelway from CMRPC National Grid and an energy auditor to discuss plans to apply for insulation LED lighting upgrades to the municipal complex, highway building, and the water and sewer departments, as well as some other smaller projects. The work will be completed this year at no cost to the town, and upon completion of the insulation components, town buildings will become eligible to receive grant funding that can be applied to mechanical upgrades, including replacement, conversion, and upgrade to high-efficiency heating and air conditioning systems, and conversions from oil to natural gas where feasible. And the grant funding this round will range between $200,000 and $250,000. So the key, besides the fact that we're going to button down the envelope in some of these buildings and hopefully save some money, we now become eligible, once we've done the insulation, to apply it towards more substantial upgrades like HVAC. ADA grant, which is also a new grant. One of the things that Michelle brought to my attention when I started was that we're not ADA compliant in the manner that we should be. Of course, I know we've been working on it since the law was passed in 1990, but we're still not there yet. So to that end, we've received $25,000 in grant funding to do a ADA plan and a transition plan, which will give us a roadmap to become compliant, not only in this building and other public buildings, but around town, access to playing fields and crosswalks and sidewalks and ramps. One of the reasons, other than the fact that we're not publicly accessible in the manner that we should be, that we want to get this done, is because we've been blocked for years from applying for other more generous grants because we simply were not ADA compliant and couldn't seem to get there. So once we begin this plan and we get the final report, we'll immediately, because of the fact that we're actually doing something about it, we'll become compliant and become eligible for future funding. And a lot of that funding is infrastructure related, so that's been a obstacle that hopefully we're working towards removing. Don Jacobs came in last week, and he's the owner of the firm who's doing our salary study. He's going to be in, I invited him to a staff meeting so that the staff would have an opportunity to ask their own questions about what the scope of work is with the salary study, what they should expect, and he's going to be sitting and meeting with them individually to take a look at the job descriptions, take a look at the classification plans, and come up with a proposal for us. And I've actually asked him to come to the February 10th meeting, just so the board has a chance to speak with him and kind of understand better where he stands, what progress he's made, and how he goes about doing this research in this project. I've also included the highway superintendent's job description in tonight's packets. I was hoping that the selectmen could take a look at the last iteration of that job description, mark it up and change it as you may see fit, so that I can include that into the wage study. we'll be probably advertising in June to fill a vacancy that we anticipate will happen sometime in October. What else? Oh, the combined positions will also be included in the salary study as well, that the board has previously seen and approved. Okay, and I just wanted to update the board as well on the fiscal year 21 budget schedule. This year's calendar will begin on February 13th, when I'll receive all the formatted departmental budget requests from the town accountant. On February 17th through the 24th, I'll meet with department heads to better understand their requests, and at some point, we'll have a meeting with the Dudley Charlton School Committee and officials. March 23rd, I'm going to submit a budget proposal to the Board of Selectmen and FAA. The Capital Improvement Committee will submit a fiscal year 21 capital improvement plan to me as well. And on March 24th, the Capital Improvement Committee meets to vote to approve their version of the fiscal year 21 capital improvement plan. On April 6th, the Board of Selectmen and FAA will do their joint meeting. On April 13th, that will be the last date for the Board of Selectmen and the FAA to vote budget recommendations, and we'll vote on the capital improvement plan at that time as well. And our town meeting is scheduled for May 18th at the school, as usual. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions for the town administrator's report? Paul?
No, I'm okay right now.
Excellent. Any questions, anyone? Accept as presented for the record. Thank you, Mr. Ruda. Yeah, so if everyone can take a chance and look at that highway superintendent description. It was updated in June of 2018. If you got any questions or concerns, please get them to Jonathan, especially with the Jacobs group coming in. We're going to really want to get moving on different positions. And this one here, we know we have a hard deadline on, so.
And I've also sent them electronically, Mr.
Right.
Chairman, to the board.
Yeah, they went out by email, so please, everyone, get a chance to look at that. Thank you. License and permits, none. Public hearing, none. Old business, vote to approve and sign the host community agreement with DMA or take any other action relative thereto. Mr. Ruda.
Mr. Chairman, we have an original copy? Yep. Okay. Pursuant to the board's direction at our last meeting, we've re-engaged DMA in the negotiation, and I used the proposal that the board approved for me to take back to them. They had no changes to it. They were good with everything that we asked for in that proposal. The only change that I made to the host community agreement was to include the addresses and updated contact information at Mr. Johnson's request. So at this time, I'm looking for the board to vote to approve it and to sign it tonight.
Paul, any questions on the agreement?
No, none, because there are no significant changes. I do want to say that obviously there's been some opposition from folks only on the matter of it being marijuana. I want to thank one of our residents for giving me a copy, and I think other people received copy by Berenson about the truth about marijuana. And I did scan through the whole thing, but I did read the last 3 chapters. And I want to point out to those citizens who still have their doubt that just like alcohol, marijuana is now legal. It's not against the law. The opening of pot shops, although there's not a great deal of longevity in terms of record, there's no record that doing so affects the crime rate within that town. I mean, this proposal does a lot of different things. Number one, it provides for use of a great building that has a history in town, that the town will benefit from, and it won't change the exterior of the building. Secondly, it's going to provide additional income for the town, perhaps significant. And third, it's going to provide jobs for people in the town. So despite periodic opposition, in my opinion, this is a no-brainer.
Excellent. Mr. Johnson?
Is the copy we have in the folder now the new version?
Want to point out the Scribner's error?
I'll get to the Scribner's error at the end, but,
Okay.
so what is the street address in paragraph 1 supposed to be? I still only see a town name.
35 Chase Avenue, Dudley.
With the principal office address of Incline Village, Nevada. It's the whole town, or is there a street name?
Third sentence.
I don't think there's an actual,
And then my point last time was, it says Incline Village on the first page, and then on the last page, it said something about it was somewhere in Miami. Now it says, oh, it's a Webster address, so.
Yes.
So to me, it looks like the same to me, it's just two different addresses and one doesn't have a street name. If you're gonna go find something to, or have to send official notifications,
so if you look on page 9, in terms of official notifications, I've asked them to add, because this was blank in the version that you saw last time, Mr. Johnson, I asked them to add me with a copy to KP Law, our town council, and all notices, consents, demands, requests, approvals, or other communications required or permitted under this agreement shall be in writing and delivered by hand or mail postage to Jason Velatico, who is at 703 Bacon Street in Webster, with a copy to his attorney.
okay.
I think that should be sufficient in terms of enforcing this agreement.
Okay, it just seems strange to me that it said, between DMA Holdings Mass LLC and Massachusetts Corporation with a principal office address of Incline Village, Nevada. Is that word funny to you?
It is, but that's the way it actually appears.
All right, so it's a Massachusetts
It's an LLC,
corporation.
correct.
With the principal office of Incline Village, Nevada.
Correct.
Legal's okay with that.
The legal's okay with it, and that's the way it actually appears, the way it was filed.
No lawyer, I don't play one on TV either.
Staying Holiday Inn last night? Mr. Sigenovich?
Mr. Administrator, legal went through this and approved it as this sits.
Legal went through this and came to our last meeting and affirmed he went through it. And I spoke to him after the last meeting, and he went through it again, and presented and contacted their attorney to make these changes as well, and provided a signed copy from the other side to us.
I understand Mr. Johnson's concerns with there being 1, 2, 3 different addresses. I understand that concern, but if council's gone through it,
When I voiced my concern, Mr. Sigenovich, it was the addresses listed on page 9 that were the enforcement, were the local enforcement addresses for us to send everything to. And that should take precedent over everything in terms of notification and so forth.
and, Mr. Chairman, I also wanted to make note to the folks at home and the folks here, we got the maximum we can get out of this. We cannot get a penny more legally, not a penny more. And we also didn't ask for some things, I'm sure you've seen in the news, where other communities asked for things that might not have been legal. We didn't do any of that. We made a point to keep that out of this. So, we couldn't do any better. We got the maximum. But, yeah, if legal approved it, I personally don't have a problem with it, the way it reads. I do, but,
There's no question that they approved it.
okay.
Paul?
I just want to be sure, because sometimes the mic doesn't come through clear. I want to be sure that Jay is satisfied with the questions that he asked about addresses.
It doesn't make sense to me, but if legal says it's fine, then it's fine.
Okay.
So,
Mr. Chairman, the reason I know 9 is the information that we need in order, under the terms of this contract, is because I had the same reservations that Mr. Sigenovich and Mr. Johnson had, and that's what legal told me, our legal counsel, that page 9 would do the trick.
well, I'm satisfied with the administrator's assurance that council's okay with this, and I'm prepared to push it to a vote if the rest of the board is comfortable with that.
I am.
I am.
So Chair will entertain a motion to approve and sign the host community agreement with DMA.
Can I get away with a so moved?
Moved by Mr. Johnson,
Seconded.
second by Mr. Sigenovich. Any further questions or concerns? Hearing none, roll call vote. Mr. Johnson.
Jay Johnson, aye.
Mr. Sigenovich.
Harry Sigenovich, aye.
Mr. Joseph.
Paul Joseph, aye.
Stephen Sullivan, aye, unanimous. And on the record, thank legal counsel. Anybody watched last time, Attorney Riley gave an excellent presentation on behalf of the town. Sign that after.
There's one page that your signature, and then the following page.
They just send it right through.
Okay, so the green is just
Well,
for,
there's one page with just the chair's signature, and then the following page is
The rest of
everyone
everybody.
else's.
okay.
See?
Chairman's the only one labeled.
Yeah.
It's going to take a quick second to sign the agreement, everyone.
I'll be down there tomorrow to sign it.
Excellent.
Right.
Wish I was here.
My useful stickers.
It's like you
What did
use that-
Jankowski do to this place?
I don't care, he says.
Everybody's so cheap.
Poor Jankowski.
Did you reuse the arrows? Yeah. Okay.
Simple-minded guy in a simple time. At this point, I'll call up the fire chief, fire and EMS,
Thank you.
staffing reorganization plan, overnight in-house fire and paramedic coverage, BOS to take any action relative thereto, table from 1/13/2020. Again, we don't have a full board tonight, but we're closer, is that is this
Yeah, it's
okay?
fine. I just need a blessing. Good, good evening, gentlemen, Mr. Chair. So did you have a chance to look over this spreadsheet?
Yes, I did.
So basically, what I'm doing here is I'm taking the per diem line and moving it into some other lines to create 2 new full-time positions so we can go to 24-hour staffing, which is the model standard throughout the industry. To try and hold on to some good help and stay competitive, we need to move in this direction. I said back in 2013, when we went to the per diem shifts, that it was going to be a temporary fix. We've now done this model for six years, just over 6 years, and it's worked well, but it's getting to the point where we need to move forward to the next step now. And I've been able to accomplish this without any increase to my budget whatsoever, as the numbers show on the spreadsheet.
My favorite part.
I'm just redispersing the money into other lines and creating a couple of new lines. And basically, that's what I have, unless you have any questions for me.
So Chief, excellent presentation, by the way. I know you've been on top of it, keeping us in the loop. If approved, when would this take effect?
Well, it would be approved for July 1st, but I'm probably going to have to get a couple people through the academy. And I've already submitted my budget based on this, my preliminary budget, but we'd probably be looking to start at September, October, because to try to get those people through their training, it would be in the budget for July 1. So for all intents and purposes, July 1, but it wouldn't probably officially start till September, October.
So you already have your candidates that you're sending to?
I haven't, because I can't, until it's approved by the
Okay.
board, I can't put positions out there that don't exist. But I have 1 or 2 people in mind, one internal, and I'd probably have to post the other position maybe. But, I mean, we're still in a preliminary stage, so as long as I get your blessing, we can move forward. And I've spoken with Mr. Reuter on multiple occasions. Again, it's no increase to my budget, at least not from this aspect. It's just taking the per diem line and dispersing it amongst these other lines that I've listed on the spreadsheet. I mean, obviously, we have contractual increases, but that has nothing to do with this.
Excellent. Any questions for the chief? Mr. Johnson?
So, better service, better organization to meet the needs of the town, and budget neutral? Is that,
Yeah, and actually, it reduces the liability a little bit on the town as well, because instead of 15 to 18 per diem people that the town could potentially be responsible for while they're on shift, I'm going down to 2 people and a handful of per diems that we keep as fill-ins in an emergency, so my span of control is becoming better too. And you're actually expanding your fire service a little bit for the overnight too, at least for the small things like alarm activations and things like that. I'd still have to have the call department came in if we had anything significant.
Let the record reflect, Mr. Massey has joined us at 7:05. Mr. Joseph is remote participating. Yes, just missed it. Any questions for the fire chief?
No, thank you, Chief. I read your report.
Well, I need you guys to vote on this to approve this.
Right, Mr. Siganovich, any questions?
No.
Paul?
No, but it's important for people to know, and this is an observation, not a question, that we can take this kind of step because of the enormous improvement in services and revenue that the chief and the department have generated over the last several years.
You know, I mean, that was one of his goals when he was hired. It wasn't obviously a hard, firm goal, but it was a projected goal. You and I were on the subcommittee, and we talked about it way back when we hired the chief, so
Yep.
to see us get to where we are, it's quite gratifying for the town, especially speaking as someone who's used the service more than once. My favorite people out there. Any further questions for the chief? Hearing none. Chair will entertain a motion for the staff reorganization plan presented by the chief tonight, dated January 27, 2020.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Siganovich.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Joseph. Roll call vote. Mr. Johnson.
Jay Johnson, aye?
Mr. Marcy.
No, Marcy, aye.
Mr. Siganovich.
Jerry Siganovich, aye.
Mr. Joseph.
Paul Joseph, aye.
Stephen Sullivan, aye. Unanimous. Thank you, chief.
Thank you very much.
I love that your team always comes out and supports.
Yep.
No matter town meeting, big decisions. Thank you, guys.
Good group of guys. Next up, Police Chief. Board of Selectmen to vote to declare an opening on the police department. Discuss a new position or take any other action relative thereto. Table from 1/13/2020. Chief Wayner.
I'm gonna get past them around. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good, I can follow that presentation, so you'll be in a giving mood. We'll be all set to go. Just when I'm passing around, as you know, I gave you a report that was prepared a few weeks back. Had you get a chance to look at that about doing some staffing reorganizations. Probably be done in like 2 stages, I think. And so the first part of that is trying to add a detective's position to the department, and then possibly next year move up to the lieutenant's position at some point along the line. So, in trying to follow up with some numbers, I've met with the administrator, and I thank him for all of his help in discussing this over the last few weeks as this all has been kind of going forward. So what I gave you all there, and I think I emailed it, and I also sent a message to Selectman Joseph, just so he might have it for reference point if he's at home. I kind of just took a snapshot of the salary line items, both for patrol and for sergeant. So I wanted to kind of simplify it a little bit for you and just kind of give you an idea of how the money works with these positions. What I'm looking to do is possibly add a full-time person. I was hoping to do it this March and then continue the position into next year. And then from the existing staff, promote an individual as a detective and move them in. So a couple things as far as the costs go. If you see on the sheet I gave you, the FY20 budget right now, between sergeants and patrol, the salary cost is roughly $818,063. In our budget, we did a couple things. As you know, we approved a new contract this past year. The budget I'm operating under right now was approved prior to that contract being put into effect. So it went into effect in July. There should be sufficient money within the budget now to move it around and cover things, but there were some changes and there were some increases in that budget. So as I'm predicting the budget going forward for next year, if I'm adding a new position, I'm looking at roughly about 7% as an overall increase with adding a new position. If I wasn't adding a new position, it was going to be at least around 4 to 5. With a new position, it's about 7. So basically, in looking at a snapshot of these numbers, if you look at just the salary and for patrol and for sergeants, it's roughly that figure of $818,000. If I move forward into next year and just added the 2.5% contractual increase, it would go up to the $838,000 number, which is a little over $20,000, just in basic contractual COLA increases, 2.5%. What we also have in the ranks is steps. So based upon each year that a person is working, they will move up in a step. So you come in, start out at step 1 as a patrolman, and then each subsequent year you move up a step until you hit your 5th year, at which time you're at top step. So the difference between those is, I'm just going to look at the figure here I have. Let me see. Rough breakdown of that, just for purposes, as of the current year, starting annual salary for patrolmen is about $47,732. At a top-level patrolman, you're looking at $63,788. So it incrementally goes up over that time. So roughly is about a $15,000 to $16,000 difference between a entry-level officer and a senior officer. So with the fact that we had a sergeant that retired, and we promoted a new sergeant from the patrol ranks, they have moved from top step patrolman to bottom step sergeant, and we hired a new patrolman in Officer Pacheco, who's starting the academy in a couple of weeks. He came in at entry level, so there's been some shifting in the numbers. But I put that second number in that page that you see under FY21 under the 838 up to 854,231. So that's if I do not hire an additional officer, just with step increases that are owed contractually and the 2.5% increase. That's what the rough budget figure is that I'd be submitting for approval for this coming year. So the difference between what it is currently and what it would be is roughly about $36,000. $168, I think, is the total there. So what I'm proposing is if we hire a new individual, the salary cost for those two positions will go up to about $899,844. So if I subtract that out from the number that it will go up to in the 854, roughly it leaves an increase in the salary accounts of about $45,613. So that's going to be the rough financial impact on the budget to add a position in the coming year. So a couple things this will do is, again, we added a couple things with the contract that weren't part of it last year. So as you know from the last meeting when we had the discussion about holidays, there's been some increase in holiday spending of around $5,000 a year. There was some money added for officer in charge pay, which added another $2,500 or so dollars. So that's why it contributes to the overall budgetary increase that we have in there. I looked at some of the overtime figures that we ran, and we're on track, again, to spend roughly between $130,000 and $140,000 in overtime, as is pretty much standard for us going forward. 75% of that overtime that we traditionally spend, 65 to 75%, is for cruiser shift replacement. That's replacing people that are out, vacation, holiday, sick, what have you. So at least the benefit of hiring new individuals are they have limited vacation time and limited time off. So they're being paid at lower rates and they have less time off than, for example, we had a sergeant who was a top step sergeant that retired, had 28 days vacation. New person coming in for the first year has nothing, and then for the first 5 years, they have 10 days. So that's where you see recognize some savings in that aspect. We also spent about 16% of our budget is on investigations, investigative overtime. So as of, I ran the figures around January 7th, we had spent around $12,000 in overtime, just in investigative overtime. So hopefully by hiring a lieutenant's position, or not a lieutenant's position, but a detective's position, I'd be able to cut that at least in half, if not more, and be able to cut some of that down for that type of purpose. I'm still seeking some grant opportunities that are out there. In fact, I had gotten a mention of the COPS hiring grant. The only problem is we've applied for that one before. I've checked with Washington on it, and they do always encourage you to apply. But the big thing with that is it's a national grant, and most of those have historically gone to big cities or other places with major issues. And so it's been somewhat of a futile effort on our part, but we're still seeking out some other opportunities that are out there. I wish I could provide more as far as revenue generation and things like that, but unfortunately, that's not our business, and I don't think people would want to see us out there writing traffic tickets to generate revenue in order to hire individuals. But it is there's a couple things. When I first started as chief back in 2003, we had 16 full-time employees. Right now we have 14, and that's going on 18 years now from that time. I'm just trying to move things up and take care of a need that we have to address, and try to do some reorganization in the staffing levels there. So the budget will go up, again, around $45,000. An overall total budget increase to add an officer goes from about 5% with no officer to about 7% with adding an officer. So that's the rough budgetary impact on that. And I can certainly answer any other questions or go over anything you may have at that point.
Questions for the chief? Mr. Johnson?
Still formulating my question.
Okay. Mr. Massey?
I'll try to talk out loud like I always do. Chief, so 7% with an additional patrolman, 5% other. What's making up the 5%? I don't, because we don't have the details in front of us. Is it, what else went up that, you know, the other departments are, you know, level funded or that?
Sure. Yeah, like I said, I think the big thing was that we had, I believe there's 4 officers that have had step increases in the line. So if I look at a number, so for example, I'll take a step 4 versus a step 5. Roughly step 4 patrolman is about 59,000, step 5 is 63,000. So now, when you take, you're taking 4,000, multiply it out times 4 individuals, you know, there's $16,000 right there that goes up. Not including, it now goes, so a person would go from, for example, from 59,000 to 65,000 as of July 1st. Okay, so you're gonna go up the $6,000 a person versus just the 4.
So salary items.
So you'll have salary items in there. And like I said, I think even just, for example, the additional holiday pay for 4 different holidays, roughly is about, right around $5,000 of an increase into the budget. Officer in charge pay, roughly about $2,500 in the budget. Clothing allowance, and then again, another $1,000. Even things such as, we have our interns or our desk coverage. Minimum wage has gone from $12 to $12.75 now. So if we maintain similar hours on that schedule, that pushes that up. So that's even increasing by about $1,100 right there. And just looking at the numbers as I put it through when I was putting everything together, roughly 5% the budget was going up whether or not I hire anybody. So it was going to be up around $55,000 to $60,000 without hiring anybody. Right now, with hiring someone, it's about 102, which is about 7%.
So they're people-based. It's not like your training budget or overtime. Well, that's kind of people-based as well, but.
Right, and I think, you know, the other thing you have to look at too is that as you pay salaries at a higher rate, you have to increase those other budgetary items at
Okay.
a comparative rate. So, for example, my overtime is always short, but I'm able to make up for that somehow, usually within the budget. But if I was given $110,000 last year, that's gonna be $112.50, because everybody's getting paid at a higher rate as it goes forward. So the ripple down the line is every budgetary item in there has some basic increase. And there's not a lot of extra fluff that's put in there. I'm not really throwing in a lot of extra things. It's more or less contractual items that we have to deal with.
Okay, no, that was helpful. I just wanted to, for the people listening, just like what kind of goes, what are the major components
Sure.
of that? So it sounds like contractual people items
Yep.
are contributing before we even do anything additional, so, thank you, Chief.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. I didn't want to overwhelm you with a whole bunch of stuff that you'd have tonight. That's why I kind of gave you a snapshot of just some of those salaries, just so you can kind of have a visual and see what just the impact on those two accounts are. Because those are really the major ones. The salary accounts are the major accounts, because you can look at clothing, you can look at other things. It's not going to be as big. But one of the areas, like, for example, where we're able to make some strides, which I'm able to keep kind of level funded, is stuff like the Quinn bill payments, so the educational incentive. So when an individual retires who's on a percentage-based education incentive, and you hire an individual that now gets a flat rate stipend, there's a big cost savings that's in there. So we're able to, even if we hire new people, we're still paying them at a lesser rate than we were for some of the individuals that worked before.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Harry?
2 questions. What is the starting salary of a new officer?
Currently, it's $47,732.
Okay. And by doing this, if we did this tonight, would the overtime expense go down?
Yes. And especially, too, I think the other thing, one of the reasons why I had asked for something to go into effect probably like in March at some point, because if you think of this, for the last 3 months of the year, Officer Pacheco is going to be going to the academy the end of February. I have another officer that's going out for some surgery, and he's going to be out probably 4 to 6 weeks. So in the next 2 or 3 months, I'll at least be short Officer Pacheco for the rest of the fiscal year, and I'll be short another officer for 4 to 6 weeks. So if I'm able to bring somebody on in March some point, at least that'll stem that tide of Officer Pacheco's status going through. And then he'll be coming out in July. And I think the big thing is, too, that, again, a person comes on, they have very limited time off. And we're going to start hitting that point come May and June, where people, if they have any time off left, they're going to be using it. So we're usually scurrying to scramble and cover shifts. So usually the fortunate thing with that is that once we get that covered, we have somebody now that can work and not have to pay overtime. And then when the school year ends, our SRO comes back onto patrol. That helps to stave off some of that extra overtime as well. So definitely we'll cut the overtime spending down.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Johnson?
Kerry stole a couple of my questions, because I couldn't formulate them quick
I
enough.
could kind of pick up what you were.
We're all sort of asking the same.
So now I got a new question. So the 130,000 in OT, is that part of the 818 for fiscal year 2020, or is that additional?
That's all part of it, yeah. That's all
That's part of it. So, okay, so the 130 is
What I do
including.
is, we get some money that we bill for the school for the SRO program. So the fortunate thing with that is, once that comes through, I'm able to relocate some of the money that's in the budget that would have been paying salaries and help to pay that account.
Okay.
So historically, if you look at it, that's roughly right around what we're spending. I've always looked at it in the baseline that we always use is about 10% of your total operating budget should be considered your overtime spending. That's roughly what you're going to spend for a year. That's kind of seen true. So, well, as of January 7th,
My battery died.
I had spent
I heard him.
just about $73,000. And so we were budgeted for 110, so I'm probably starting to get fairly low on that figure right
So
now.
110 is in that 800 something
Yes.
thousand? Okay, good.
Yes.
And then, because there's less vacation time for a new employee, there's less overtime required to cover their shifts. We answered the question that there would be less overtime because you'd have another officer to cover some of the shifts that are hard to cover right now.
Yes.
Okay, good, it's all clicking now.
Yep. Another thing, too, is like, if you think about it, when Officer Pacheco graduates, he's still gonna be at a step one pay level. Just because of his status, he's currently reserved and gonna be a student officer, and then he'll start, so he's gonna basically have had the same pay level for almost 2 years until he moves up. And the new person hired is still gonna basically be at that same entry pay level for the great majority of the fiscal year. So we'll have an entire year where we're gonna have individuals that are gonna be at the bottom end of the pay scale, which will really be beneficial as well.
Do you project additional attrition, or just you seeing normal rates of attrition where, you know, everyone wants to retire?
Yeah.
Then you bring on the new guy.
Well, I don't foresee very many that are in that line. I mean, unless it's something, happens to be something unforeseen, like a medical situation, but I'm probably, I think I'm the oldest on the department, and be 51 in a couple of months, so.
And that's young.
Yeah, so you have, so I don't think we'll be seeing too many people go by just, unless obviously unless some other opportunity comes up or something unforeseen, an injury or whatever, God forbid, but I don't foresee that happening anytime soon.
So Chief, on the long-term vacancy you're gonna have for the surgery, without going down HIPAA violations, and is it a job-related?
I don't believe it is, no.
And are you required by contract to go first, right of first refusal to fill those shifts, or do we have flexibility?
Yes, for the most part on them, yes, until we have a, I have to double check the figure, but there is a certain, once you're out for a certain period of time, we can then shift them to not being part of the right of first refusal. Yeah, I'll have to double check. There is some language in there that we can stem some of those. And we'll have to depend too of, usually what'll happen, especially in long term, we end up posting shifts. So what I do is make up a new shift posting. So rather than leaving long-term vacancies in places, I might be able to move people around or split shifts to kind of reduce some overtime opportunities as well. So there's a couple of different things I'll be looking at.
Okay. Al?
Just two things. Has the detective's job description been set in stone?
Has not, no.
No? So are you thinking of it having like a myriad of similarities from like a patrolman position, or is it gonna be more of like a leadership status as far as sergeant and higher up, or is it gonna be?
Going to be a patrol level position at this point. Ideally, it should be a sergeant, but again,
Usually in a
I think-
leadership position.
Yeah, I think ideally it should be, but I think it's one of the things where we have, number one, we have nothing right now.
Right.
And number two, it's a cost factor. So, but I think, yes, ideally, you'd want that as some kind of leadership position.
And has this been like talked about in the salary study with the,
Bring it up.
what's the name of the
Jacobs.
Jacobs Group? Has that been discussed?
I don't
or-
know if it's part of it, because these are all contractual.
Okay.
So most of the time when these things are compared or done, they're compared with other communities of similar sizes.
Okay.
So I don't know if I'm not sure if it's part of it, but it's all publicly available.
Okay.
I don't think it would be, Al, because it's, like you said, it's unionized, so.
Okay.
it's-
Good questions, Al.
Paul?
It's paying attention.
Yeah, I have no questions beyond what's been asked.
Excellent.
See, we're all on the same page, Mr. Joseph? Is that what you just said?
Yeah, I think we are.
On that one, yeah.
I'm just gonna ask the town administrator to offer his synopsis, because he's the one who's been dealing with it.
I think you just did, Mr. Chairman.
First, I want to point out, I'm going to be the wet blanket, but I support this and the two fire positions 110%. Couple of things I want to point out. This, first of all, our source of revenue, the fire chief isn't in here, but we have a new source of pretty sustainable revenue. Our ambulance rates have gone up, our calls have gone up. I don't foresee health insurance payments going down in terms of what we're able to recover from insurance companies when we transport patients. I don't see call volume going down. So it's a pretty sustainable extra source of funding that we're realizing off the and it doesn't affect the tax base whatsoever. So in other words, it doesn't cost the taxpayer anything. Now, let me just say that the fire chief is correct. His salary his salary accounts are being moved around and everything, and his budget is relatively intact. And the police chief gave a pretty good synopsis on how it affects his budget. But the board should be aware that we're going to use, these three positions will cost the town, not so much the police department's budget directly, or the fire department's budget directly, $102,000 for the first year. I brought up the idea of fees first, increased fees, to illustrate why I support it. There's a way to pay for it, because our revenue for fees have gone up just on ambulance calls alone. But I want the board to know that that's going to be the actual cost to the town, above and beyond each individual department's budget. The reason for that was, well, I think I provided you with the sheet last week. A new fire employee at around 53 grand. Health insurance, the worst case scenario, 16,000. There's a retirement contribution from the town, 4 grand. There's a Medicare match, but about 774 bucks. There's workers' comp that goes on top of that. We can do it. I support it, and I think now is the best time, probably since I've been involved in town politics and town government, to take a shot at it. But the Board of Selectmen need to know it's gonna cost us 102 grand the first year.
Mr. Johnson?
I'm sorry, I'm choking on a candy.
But, again, before, there are ways to recoup that money. For instance, if you bring on a detective, you also have a scenario where you're not bringing people in on overtime, so that patrolmen can act as detectives. And there's no limit or cost associated with an investigation because of overtime constraints. You're actually recouping that because you have somebody full-time dedicated to do it. I think it's a good idea.
In theory, too, I guess it would free up, I'm not sure what our correlation was to the chief's number he gave us. It would free up patrol to do patrol. They could do public safety impact things that need to be done.
Correct.
That is the purpose, Mr. Chairman. Once you, I think the whole thing is to, because you could assign anybody to anything, but if you don't provide the patrol base, that's what adds to your costs. If you take a guy off patrol and you assign them to whatever it is, you're just creating a vacancy. So the whole purpose of this is to try to plug those holes, but still have the flexibility to move people around and do things.
Mr. Johnson?
Just to clarify, so I think we understand, Chief said it best, it's, there's, the revenue opportunities are not the same because, the ambulance has, cutting bills, right?
Right.
So the net increase in revenue is really paying for the additional fire salary.
It's, no,
Plus.
the net increase in revenue from, if we only consider, forget the pilots and the cannabis and all that other stuff, if we only consider the increase in the billing that the fire department has realized in EMS, we can more than cover the expense of the health insurance, the other costs outside of the department, so outside of the police department and the fire department.
Right.
We can more than cover the cost.
Just with that.
Just with that, considering nothing else. And the reason I point to that is because it's a pretty sustainable source of funding. It's not gonna go away. Ambulance billing's not gonna go away. But again, go back to ambulance billing. Increased billing, increased cost to send those bills and prepare those bills. That's figured into his budget. So that will show an increase in his budget. Two new positions, full-time, require extra overtime. Covered within the fire department's budget. So there are other costs that we need to consider, but these three positions, I think, are a good plan.
Altogether, though, that's relatively budget neutral.
Yes.
Bottom line budget.
Yeah.
Al?
So your starting figure is 102,000. Can we predict over, say, 5 years that goes down? Can we predict that because of what you're saying is?
It won't go down. It's only going to go up.
It's only going to go up?
There's going to be more retirement liability. There's going to be more everything.
More salary.
But
more-
it's the
Health
cost
insurance
of,
goes up.
we don't, it's the cost for law enforcement, right? What's the cost for public safety? It's not something that we say, you either think it's needed.
Right.
Needed in the way the chief recommends, or it's not.
But you think with your professional intuition that this is the correct time to act upon this issue and really make this position happen, because we can pay for it.
In 10 years, there's never been a better time, as far as I'm concerned, than to do it right now.
All right, fair enough.
And Chief Bennett, Mr. Chairman, and Chief, you've been looking to get back to where we were from I know everybody makes more money nowadays, but just having bodies does allow him flexibility to do these things. I mean, if you hear the alerts that people see and what stuff's happening, and chief's guys, what they have to deal with, they need help, so.
Yeah, and I've gone from 16 when I started as chief back in '03, down to 11 at one point, and then, we've worked our way back up. And
We like to say as a board, we don't want to go backwards. We want
Yeah,
progress.
I think it's a good idea.
I think the underlying question that everybody pretty much has touched upon is, I think going forward, we would like to see how the overtime trend is gonna be.
Yeah.
With more full-time detective, you had talked about detective, investigative overtime, and there's patrol overtime. You brought it up, we have an extra body, I think that's what, looking forward, people are gonna be looking at. See if it trends neutral with the costs that are fixed, or if it's gonna continue to creep at.
Right, I
whatever
think
the
that if
rate
we're
is.
assigning, Mr. Chairman, if we're assigning a certain percentage of your budget to investigations, I think the new model probably relieves that a lot.
Oh, yeah.
If you have
and-
somebody who's here doing it all the time.
Yeah, it all goes, and I think the tough thing, I think, that I always look at is, I've had very few years where I haven't had someone that had some type of a long-term injury or illness. And so that's how it's always very difficult to predict.
Yeah, can't predict it.
If everything was a standard, and I could say, all right, yeah, from year 1 to year 2, here's the difference. But I always seem to have something in there where there's something that a person gets injured, or a person gets sick, or something else happens along the way, and it throws off those numbers. But ideally, yeah, the more people you have, the more you can absorb some people being out here and there, or, and also, too, limited overtime opportunities and lower costs.
Excellent. And
Mr.
Mr. Johnson.
One more question for TA. Have we looked at the changing family medical leave laws in the state and how they'll impact the town?
The good news is that there's a lot of public employers are generally exempt from a lot of those changes, including paying for, that's something the town would have to adopt. It wouldn't be mandated under law that's, to pay for people who are out on Family Medical Leave Act,
Thank you.
above and beyond their regular earned time.
Terry?
So if I was sitting at home, I'd be wondering how much more this is going to cost me. How much are my taxes going up? Is there an override? Is there a debt exclusion? Excuse me. Because again, if I was at home, I'm seeing, wow, there's 3 more people coming in. So no one's taxes are going up. This is all self-funded or absorbed by other places. People are getting more people, better service, and nothing's changing for them financial-wise, correct? I just want to make sure I'm,
We have a pretty sustainable new revenue source to get this plan off the ground, correct?
okay.
Any
Again,
fur-
I support this, it's just, I know someone out there is thinking that, so I just want to ask the question for them.
Any further questions for the chief or the administrator?
Nope.
Hearing none. Chair will entertain a motion to accept and approve a declaration opening on the police department, and to approve separate motion, and to approve the new position? Or you want a separate motion?
I think the board can just declare an opening on the department, and if you want to set a date, if you want to make it sometime mid-March, or whatever you want to do for a date.
So we won't accept it, we're not gonna do anything
I
with
think
it.
if the board declares the opening, that would be it there, to go into effect, whatever date.
So what date we looking at?
Well, you pick a date.
I'd probably want to say, well, I originally had March 1st, but that's when we had it back, because I need some time to at least post it and get it,
That's quick.
get everything done. So I'd say, let me just look what a date in March is here. Have it effective, how would March 13th sound?
As long as
It's
it's
a
not
Friday.
Friday. Mr. Massey.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we declare an opening on the police department as of, to be effective March 13th, 2020.
Motion made.
Second.
Second by Mr. Johnson. Any further questions or concerns? Hearing none. All in favor, roll call. Mr. Johnson?
Jay Johnson, aye.
Mr. Massey?
John Marcy, aye.
Mr. Sigenovich?
Gary Sigenovich, aye.
Paul?
Paul Joseph, aye.
Stephen Sullivan, aye, unanimous.
Thank you very much for the support, I
Chief.
appreciate it.
Before we go to new business, I'd like to go back to old business 9A at the request of Mr. Massey, and I did vote in the affirmative. So I'd like to bring it up for reconsideration, the vote to approve and sign the community host agreement for the purpose of making it a unanimous vote of the board. I so move. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Sigenovich. Roll call vote. Mr. Johnson?
I'm sorry, what are we voting on again?
John just wants the vote to be 5-0. He wants to be unanimous vote. Same
Jay
motion.
Johnson, aye.
John Marcy, aye.
Mr. Sigenovich?
Gary Sigenovich, aye.
Paul?
Paul Joseph, aye.
Stephen Sullivan, aye. Let the record now reflect a unanimous 5-0 vote of the Board of Selectmen.
Well, we have to, now you have to vote again, right?
Yeah, keeps looking, just in case.
Oh, that was just a,
That was
oh,
to
that was reconsider,
reconsider.
okay. Now to,
That's why I asked you. how it-
right.
2-2.
Yeah, I did
I know, I'm
too.
being a pain, but
That was a
I think
reconsideration
it's
vote.
important.
Vote to approve the signed host community agreement with DMA. Mr. Johnson?
Keep going to me first.
Because you're right here.
Jay Johnson, aye.
Mr. Massey?
John Marcy, aye.
Mr.
Gary
Sigenovich?
Sigenovich, aye.
Paul?
Paul Joseph, aye.
Stephen Sullivan, aye. Let the record reflect that as a 5-0 vote to approve and sign the host community agreement, and the reconsideration was unanimous. New business, Water Department. Superintendent George Petrinos looking for permission to test for a potential fourth water source. Mr. Petrinos.
Good evening. As you guys know, the Water Department presently is running two primary pumping stations. We originally had three pumping stations, Station 1, Schofield Ave and New Boston Road. Problem was that the main station, which is the one we're going to be going into rehabilitation next year, became defunct in about the year 2000. The shallow well system degraded, fell apart. We had some bacteria hits, low water supply out of that station. It was finally put under out of service, but it was still tested actively. That's the station now that I'm putting everything forward for development and engineering for a new well, which is now viable because we did have that confirmed. So I'm hoping that station will be online in 2021, somewhere in that time frame. When that station goes online and the final repairs of this one have already almost come complete now, we'll be back to 3 pumping stations, and we'll be able to handle most anything that comes at us comfortably. Problem is for redundant supply, according to the state, we still don't meet that demand. As you know, 20 years ago, we did go searching for a fourth, at the time was a fourth water source because we did have 3 stations back then. They tried all areas of town. They even tried over to the west side of town. They pinpointed certain areas that looked at good potentials, but ran into many roadblocks. Those roadblocks are still there today. Even if we had permission to go on properties and test over there, it's unsure what we're going to find. You may get into land taking, eminent domain processes, things like that will take years and years of litigation. Plus, the pump station owns 5 to 6 years to put that in. So you're looking at 15, maybe 20, who knows, way out there. So after talking to some more engineers and some people for drilling of wells and that, and thank you very much to Kenny Bakevich, thank God, who I was able to speak to before his passing, led me on some land on the trail behind Edwards Road area, New Boston Road area. There's about 17 acres there that he said the town did own, and I had mentioned to him that I'd like to stay and try the French River aquifers because there's abundance of water supply. And even though we have 2 stations down there, we can't actively put 3 right together and pump all together going up Schofield Ave, whatever, it would blow mains left and right. So I came up with the idea, and with some help with some engineers, about setting up for a pump station somewhere in that vicinity, do some test welling, getting some permission for test welling, test drilling, and piping water less than a mile up towards Gentek's property, going up towards the Eagle Drive area. And if any sources, well people will tie into the main, we'll have shut-off stubs put up so they can do that. And the idea is to pipe it directly downtown up into the West Main Street area, possibly a supply tank in the process before that point, where we can have water going directly for Bates water supply. That sounded good. So a lot of people seem to like the idea, so I am asking, and it's not going to happen right now. I've got enough on the plate getting us to where we need to be. Everything's coming to fruition pretty quickly. I'm happy to say right now. It's going to take some time still, but we're working on it. This is just allowing us so we can go on the property at any time. When I have some of the well equipment doing the other station project, I can ship them down to the location there to do some test welling, save a little money, because they're already in the town doing some things anyway. Could be next year, could be the year after, could be, it all depends how things play out. Funding, the time periods, how we're making out with the other stuff. So that's kind of where we're at right now, where I'm looking at.
So, George, that land, I believe there was a piece donated by the developer of
Amarillo.
Brookstone, and there was a piece from the developer of Perryville.
Yeah, this one, if you go up Carpenter Road from
back.
Ridge Drive, and you see where the old bridge used to be and the rail trail going to the left there, and I only got a quick glimpse of it down in there, but there's 17 acres go to the Connecticut border, and they ride behind all the houses, like Edwards Road area and stuff. And Kenny originally told me there was 13, but the assessor's map showed 17, which is even better. So we're going to do some testing abutting that rail trail, see if we can come up with an aquifer potential in that area. And if it does, we've already hit some major ones, even with the station here, putting that back online. The water is plentiful. West Dudley is just not viable for us right now. We need to get something in place within the next 5-10 years. It's just something to start. It's just a starting point. It may not work, but it's better than doing nothing.
Now, is that straight town-owned land, or was it conservation restriction on it?
I don't know. Kenny seemed to think it was town-owned land. There was
I
no
know we own it, but
restriction.
I'm saying, we have to make sure there's no.
Yeah, well, at the time when it's ready, we'll do a little research on it and that. But like I said, it's just a starting point because there's nothing else around town that's even giving us anything close to eyeing at. At least this, if I can catch an aquifer from the French River there, I've got a good supply, and it's less than a mile to pump it up towards West Main Street, cut through the back roads. And like I said, it's going to take a lot of engineering, a lot of negotiations with maybe the developer up there, things like that. It's just something to start from, so we have a base.
Right. Any questions, Mr. Petrinos? Mr. Sigenovich?
No, none.
Massey?
No, we've been looking for a new aquifer. If it shows potential, let's start it. Then we'll keep going.
Yeah, like I said, this is not what we're doing right now. We're getting the system back to where it should have been.
Right.
It should be right now, and then that should be hopefully in 2021. Then that'll put us in a much better position for any type of new water needs for the town. This is just going the extra mile to try to find a fourth, or at least a starting point. And like I said, if it doesn't pan out, I have a little bit to work with in that 17 acres. I can go for certain spots, try to catch one. If I don't, we don't do it. But if there is, and it turns out good, then we can pursue it from there.
Paul, any questions?
No, this is an important project for the town.
Absolutely. Mr. Johnson?
I've walked those woods a bunch of times.
There's a pond back
I was
there.
gonna say this name, up by your neighborhood, right?
Yeah,
Pool and a
I
pond.
think there's a bench out there. I don't know if Ken was involved in putting that out there, but there's some trails up in that area. It's wet.
Maybe I can dedicate a watering pump station to his name. You never know.
That's the actual railroad.
Oh, yeah, Brookstone. Yeah, I'm looking at it.
Any further questions for the superintendent? Hearing none. Thanks, George.
Thank you, George. I didn't realize Jonathan.
Yeah, I knew there's a pond back there.
Yeah. The more you know.
Board member comments. Paul?
Are we doing this?
Paul?
I'm good for now.
It's just for you to work on over the next 2 weeks.
Mr. Massey?
I am good, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Sigenovich? Yeah.
I'm good, thank you.
I have one I was asked to read tonight. On March 21st, 2020, it's called the Third Annual Be Better Basketball Tournament. located at Shepherd Hill Regional High School, 68 Dudley Oxford Road. Registration time on that day, 8:30 a.m. Games begin at 9. It's a seeded tournament, double elimination, 3-game minimum. $150 per team, $40 for additional player. For more information, contact at John Pear 3on3 as one word at gmail.com. Visit the Facebook page, Friends of John Pear Student Support Fund. All proceeds benefit the John Pear Student Support Fund, and the genesis behind this, it's a tournament established in the memory of Mr. Pear, who was the principal at Dudley Middle School before he tragically lost his life in an accident. The monies are used in principle to help children who otherwise would be unable to afford to go on some of the trips that charge a fee. They disperse it as needed, I believe, to help children be able to participate with their co-students. It's open to grades 5 through 8. It's a co-ed tournament. High school level, a women tournament, a men tournament, and a adult co-ed tournament. It's open to anyone who would like to participate. If you just want to go and watch, you can purchase a wristband for $7, which allows unlimited access to the games, and there's also a craft setup for people to fundraise for different groups. It's a most worthwhile cause. It's wholeheartedly supported by the town and obviously the school community. Once again, it's March 21st, 2020. Contact information, John Pear, 3on3@gmail.com. Pear is spelled P-A-I-R-E. Any further questions? Hearing none. Paul, board member comments?
No?
Paul's good. Departmental communications, fire and EMS.
I just had one quick thing that I forgot to mention before. We were also asked to do our own revenue sheets for the year, along when we submitted our budget, and between EMS, fire permits, fire fines, and there was one other on the list that I can't think of off the top of my head, but it came out to it was either a 32 or 36% increase over last year, which was pretty significant. I just wanted to throw those numbers out there.
Thanks, Chief. Police. Good. George, you all set from before? Representing Highway. Nothing? I just want to take a moment, I should have did it in the board member,
I was gonna ask about that.
to just recognize Stan Galinsky. Stan's been our interim foreman now for, I believe, over a year, right, Stan? Yeah. And due to some unforeseen issues down on the highway, Stan has been running the show, ran it through a duration storm we had. It wasn't a backbreaker storm, but it was a duration storm, no doubt about it. And I know I speak for the rest of the board, but I'll allow the board to echo. We thank Stan for making it a seamless transition, and he took care of everything as we all know he would do. Thank you, Stan.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Student rep, Al, what do you got for us?
So first thing, Brock Doobie committed to WPI as the lead kicker for 4 years there. Great guy, super brain in the classroom, absolutely outstanding. Maddie Marsh ran the 55. She was the fastest in the state a few days ago. Again, great athlete, great mind. The third quarter started today out of the 4 that we have. The second quarter grades closed on Friday last week. Report cards are available on Friday this week for the second quarter. The show choir home show is this Friday. It's on Friday and Saturday. Friday is from 6 to 10, and Saturday is from 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. NHS is having their first ever throw a pie at a teacher day tomorrow during lunch, and a course selection breakfast for the incoming 9th graders of next year is on February 11th at 9 a.m.
Excellent. Mr. Johnson, save the best for last.
I believe there's a couple other fundraising activities in the works. I believe Dudley Little League has a trivia night on February 8th. Some well-known people in town are putting in teams. So once you get your team in,
Is there a cost associated with that?
I believe it was $60 per team, up to 6 people on the team.
February 8th?
February 8th, at Drafters, I believe, like that evening. I think the DLL site has the information.
Excellent.
And the Boy Scouts are currently on their, one of their many fundraisers. I believe they're selling meat sticks currently. They're pretty good, buck a pop.
Don't they also have a
Oh, we also got the
spaghetti supper?
spaghetti dinner coming up
February 22nd.
February 22nd, thank you.
5 to 7:30,
5 to 7:30 up at St. Anthony's,
$10 per person,
$10 per person,
take out and, or eat in, I
both.
believe, along with meat sticks.
That's all I have.
You know what I have? That's all he has. At this time, we will take a motion, roll call vote to adjourn, but into executive session under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, subsection 21A2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, or to conduct collective bargaining.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Massey,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Johnson, not to reconvene in open session. Roll call vote, Mr. Johnson,
Jay Johnson, aye.
Mr. Massey,
Joe Marcy, aye.
Mr. Sigenovich,
Gary Sigenovich, aye.
Paul,
Paul Joseph, aye.
Stephen Sullivan, aye, unanimous. This concludes our regularly scheduled televised portion of our meeting.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Paul, you gonna do executive?
Paul, are you doing executive, sir?